a small town in Tennessee where the sun bleeds orange and pink across the sky, and a lone girl stands ready to unleash a storm. The sun hung low over the dusty fields of Willow Creek, Tennessee, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. A teenage girl, no older than 16, stood alone in a dirt-stained plaid shirt, her hands clenched into fists. Her name was Ellie Harper, and her hazel eyes burned with a fire that could have scorched the earth beneath her boots. Across from her, 3 boys, big, loud, and cruel, circled her twin sister Sarah, who was crumpled on the ground, her glasses cracked, her lip bleeding. They laughed, their voices sharp like knives, taunting Sarah for being weak, for being different. Ellie's heart thundered in her chest. These bullies had no idea what they just unleashed, because Ellie Harper wasn't just a farm girl. Pause, dramatic. She was a legend, a ghost whispered about in the shadows of the world's most elite fighting force, and they just made the worst mistake of their lives. Pause. Hey, if you're new to Whisper Fable, hit that subscribe button and join our storytelling family. You don't want to miss what happens next. This was no ordinary day in Willow Creek. The small town, with its single gas station and weathered barns, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Ellie and Sarah Harper were twins, inseparable since birth, raised on their family's sprawling farm where they milked cows before dawn and hauled hay until dusk. But Sarah was softer, quieter, her nose always in a book, while Ellie was the wildfire, fearless, stubborn, and fiercely protective. The townsfolk called them the Harper girls, but only a few knew the truth about Ellie. At 18, she'd vanished from Willow Creek, leaving behind whispers and questions. Some said she'd run off to join the military. Others swore she was dead. The truth? Pause, suspenseful. It was far stranger and far more dangerous. It was 2010 when Ellie left. She wasn't just any soldier. At 22, after grueling training that broke even the toughest men, she'd earned a place in Delta Force, the U.S. Army's most secretive and lethal unit. Her code name? Viper. She was a phantom, slipping into war zones, dismantling terrorist cells, and vanishing without a trace. Her missions were classified, her name erased from records. To the world, Ellie Harper didn't exist. But to Sarah, she was still the sister who'd braid her hair and chase fireflies with her under the Tennessee stars. Now, 6 years later, Ellie was back. Not for good, just for a week, to check on Sarah and their aging parents. She'd kept her return quiet, blending into farm life like she'd never left. But trouble has a way of finding those who try to hide. That afternoon, as Ellie was mending a fence near the edge of their property, she heard Sarah's scream. It wasn't just a sound. It was a dagger to her heart. She dropped her tools and ran, her boots pounding the earth, her instincts kicking into overdrive. When she reached the clearing by the old oak tree, she saw them, Tommy Grayson and his 2 lackeys, the kind of small-town bullies who thrived on making others feel small. Sarah was on her knees, clutching her books, tears streaming down her face as Tommy loomed over her, mocking her stutter. "Say it again, freak," Tommy sneered, kicking dirt at Sarah. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Ellie's. Blood turned to ice, then fire. She stepped into the clearing, her shadow falling long across the ground. The boys froze, their laughter dying in their throats. Ellie's presence was like a storm rolling in, quiet, but heavy with the promise of destruction. "Step away from my sister," she said, her voice low, steady, and cold as steel. Tommy smirked, sizing her up. She was lean, her hair pulled. Back in a messy ponytail, her work boots scuffed. To him, she was just another farm girl. He had no idea who he was dealing with. "Or what?" Tommy spat, stepping closer. "You gonna cry like your weirdo twin?" Ellie's eyes narrowed. In that moment, she wasn't on a farm in Tennessee. She was back in the deserts of Syria, the jungles of Colombia, the places where hesitation meant death. Her training kicked in, her body moving faster than thought. In a blur, she grabbed Tommy's wrist, twisted it behind his back, and dropped him to his knees with a single, precise motion. He yelped, his face contorted in pain. The other two boys lunged, but Ellie was a whirlwind, a sidestep, a sharp elbow to one's ribs, a knee to the other's gut. In seconds, they were sprawled in the dirt, gasping for air. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide. "Ellie, stop! They're not worth it." But Ellie wasn't listening. She crouched in front of Tommy, her face inches from his. "You ever touch my sister again?" she whispered. "And I'll bury you so deep they'll need a map to find you." Her words weren't a threat. They were a promise, carved from years of facing men far more dangerous than him. Tommy's bravado crumbled. He nodded frantically, his eyes darting to his friends who were still groaning on the ground. Ellie stood, helping Sarah to her feet, brushing the dirt off her sister's jacket. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's go home." But this wasn't the end. Pause, intense. Tommy Grayson wasn't the type to let humiliation slide. He was the son of Sheriff Grayson, the most powerful man in Willow Creek, a man who ruled the town like his personal kingdom. By nightfall, word of the fight had spread, twisted into a story that painted Ellie as the aggressor, a crazy outsider who'd attacked 3 innocent boys. The sheriff's office was buzzing, and Tommy was spinning a tale of victimhood, his pride bruised but his ego roaring for revenge. At the Harper farm, Ellie sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Sarah sat across from her, her glasses taped together, her face pale. Their parents, weathered by years of hard work, exchanged worried glances. "Ellie," her father said, his voice gruff, "you can't go picking fights with the sheriff's boy. This ain't the army. This is home." Ellie's jaw tightened. "They hurt Sarah, Dad. I wasn't going to stand there and watch." Sarah reached for her hand. "I'm okay, Ellie. Really, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Ellie cut in, her voice fierce. "Nobody touches you. Nobody." The next morning, the sheriff's cruiser rolled up the Harper's gravel driveway, its lights flashing. Sheriff Grayson stepped out, his badge gleaming, his face hard as stone. Behind him, Tommy smirked, his arm in a sling for dramatic effect. The sheriff didn't bother with pleasantries. "Ellie Harper," he said, "you're under arrest for assault." The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with tension. Sarah gasped. Her mother clutched her father's arm. But Ellie didn't flinch. She stood, her movements calm, deliberate. "You sure you want to do this, Sheriff?" she asked, her voice carrying a weight that made the man pause just for a second. But Sheriff Grayson wasn't used to being questioned. He cuffed her, reading her rights as he led her to the cruiser. The town watched from their porches, whispers spreading like wildfire. The Harper girl was in trouble now. No one crossed the Graysons and walked away clean. At the station, Ellie sat in a holding cell, her back straight, her eyes fixed on the wall. She wasn't afraid. She'd faced worse interrogations in foreign prisons, firefights in the dead of night. This was nothing. But her mind wasn't on herself. It was on Sarah, on the fear in her sister's eyes, on the town that had turned, its back on them. She knew Tommy wouldn't stop. Bullies never do. And Sheriff Grayson? He was just a bigger version of his son hiding behind a badge. What Ellie didn't know was that Tommy had a plan. He'd heard the rumors about Ellie, the ones that said she was more than just a farm girl. He didn't believe them, but he was curious and vindictive. That night, he and his buddies broke into the Harper's barn, looking for anything to use against Ellie. They found her old duffel bag, tucked in a corner, stuffed with gear she'd brought back from her last mission. A knife with a worn handle, a burner phone, a notebook filled with coded notes. Tommy's eyes gleamed. This was leverage. He didn't understand what he'd found, but he knew it was trouble. Meanwhile, Ellie's past was catching up. In a dimly lit office in Virginia, a man in a suit stared at a computer screen, his fingers tapping impatiently. Colonel James Rohr, Ellie's former handler in Delta Force, had just received a report. Viper had surfaced in a small Tennessee town, involved in a civilian altercation. Rohr cursed under his breath. Ellie was supposed to be off the grid, her identity buried. If the wrong people found out she was back, people she'd crossed in her missions, the consequences could be catastrophic. He picked up the phone. "Get me a team to Willow Creek, now." Back in town, Ellie was released on bail thanks to her parents mortgaging part of the farm. She returned home to find Sarah waiting, her face streaked with tears. "They're saying you're dangerous, Ellie," Sarah whispered. "They're saying you're not who you say you are." Ellie knelt in front of her sister, her voice soft but firm. "I'm your sister. That's who I am. And I'm not gonna let anyone hurt you, not Tommy, not his dad, not anyone." But the danger was bigger than Willow Creek. Tommy, drunk on his own ego, had shown the duffel bag's contents to his cousin, a lowlife with ties to a militia group out in the hills. The cousin recognized the gear for what it was: military, high level. He made a call, and soon word reached a man named Victor Krall, a former arms dealer Ellie had taken down in Afghanistan. Krall had been rotting in a black site prison until he escaped 6 months ago, vowing revenge on the operative who'd ruined him. When he heard Viper was in Tennessee, he smiled. This was his chance. The next day, Willow Creek woke to chaos. A black SUV roared into town, carrying Krall and his men, hardened mercenaries with no regard for collateral damage. They didn't care about Tommy or the sheriff. They wanted Ellie. The town square became a battlefield as Krall's men stormed, the streets demanding to know where the Harper girl was. The townsfolk, caught off guard, pointed to the farm. Sheriff Grayson, realizing he was out of his depth, tried to intervene, but a single gunshot from Krall's lieutenant silenced him. Ellie was in the barn when she heard the engines. Her instincts screamed ambush. She grabbed Sarah, pulling her into the house, barking orders to her parents to get to the cellar. "Stay down, no matter what," she said, her voice calm but urgent. She slipped into the attic, retrieving a hidden cache of weapons she'd stashed years ago: a pistol, a rifle, a few grenades. She wasn't just a farm girl anymore. She was Viper. The mercenaries surrounded the farm, their boots crunching on the gravel. Krall stepped forward, his voice booming. "Viper, come out, or we burn this place to the ground." Ellie peered. Through a crack in the attic window, her mind racing. She could take them, maybe. But Sarah and her parents were at risk. She needed a plan. That's when she saw the headlights in the distance, Rohr's team, moving fast. Delta Force didn't mess around, but they were still minutes away, and Krall wasn't waiting. What followed was a masterclass in survival. Ellie moved like a shadow, using the farm's terrain to her advantage. She took out one mercenary with a silent knife throw, another with a chokehold in the dark. She rigged a tractor to explode, drawing Krall's men into a trap. The farm became a war zone, fire and smoke rising into the night sky. Sarah, hiding in the cellar, clutched her mother's hand, whispering prayers. Krall was no amateur. He'd faced Viper before and knew her tricks. He cornered her in the barn, his gun pressed to her temple. "You cost me everything," he growled. "Now you pay." Ellie's eyes flicked to the rafters where she'd rigged a rope earlier. "You talk too much," she said, and with a flick of her wrist, she triggered the trap. A beam swung down, knocking Krall off balance. She dove for his gun, and in a brutal hand-to-hand fight, she took him down, her training overriding her fear. By the time Rohr's team arrived, the farm was quiet, the mercenaries dead or captured. Krall was cuffed, his dreams of revenge shattered. Ellie stood in the wreckage, blood on her knuckles, her breath heavy. Rohr approached, his face grim. "You can't stay here, Viper, not after this." Ellie looked at the farmhouse where Sarah stood in the doorway, her eyes filled with awe and fear. "I know," Ellie said, "but I had to protect her." The town of Willow Creek was never the same. The Graysons' power crumbled, Tommy's lies exposed. The townsfolk whispered about the Harper girl who'd saved them, though no one knew the full truth. Ellie disappeared again, leaving behind a letter for Sarah. "You're stronger than you know. Live your life. I'll always be watching." As the sun rose over the farm, Sarah stood alone, clutching the letter, her heart heavy but proud. Her sister was a legend, and she'd carry that with her always. "Hey, thanks for sticking with Whisper Fable through this wild ride." I hope Ellie and Sarah's story hit you as hard as it hit us. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know from which part of the country you're watching this video. Let's see how far this story's reached.